Hi, Sebastian, and everybody else that's hopping on.
Hi, Courtney. Hi, everyone.
We're going to give it a few more minutes because I see everybody is starting to join. Hey, Andres. So we'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll get started. Sebastian, is it okay with you if I kick it off and then turn it over to you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, perfect.
Courtney, do you mind if I do a quick share just to make sure that everything is good with the presentation?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let me just share over here.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, that's what I want to test, but it should be on now, right?
It is dark right now.
Okay. Is it showing up the presentation or still no?
It's black. We
It's
can
black?
see
Okay.
your screen, but I don't see a presentation.
Okay. Let me try again. Okay, let's try again. What about now?
Now we can see it.
Is it too narrow or is it of a good size?
Looks good.
Okay, awesome.
Well, I think with that, we can probably get started if that's okay, and I'll introduce you.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So thank you everybody for joining. This is the South Florida chapter. It's been a couple of months since we've had our last meeting, so we are very excited for all of you giving up part of your day to join us, especially in the middle of summer. I know it's a lot of time for vacations and traveling, so thanks for being here. I am Courtney Dominguez. I am one of the leaders of the South Florida chapter. We've got Andres Casada on the call. He is one of my co-leaders, and I haven't seen Tracy Dixon yet, but I'm sure she'll be joining us in a few minutes. And she is our other partner in crime, leading the South Florida chapter. So for those of you, if you haven't signed up yet, definitely sign up so you can see our upcoming opportunities. We actually have our next event scheduled already for August, and Andres will be leading that session. So looking forward to that next month. Today we've got Sebastian with us. He is a longtime UiPath MVP. He is, I'll let him introduce himself, but he is an automation engineer at World Connect. Sebastian and I have had the pleasure of knowing each other and working together for quite a few years. So we appreciate him joining us today, and extra excited to hear about this. For those of you on the call that maybe exploring different automation tools, maybe you're already on that journey, or maybe there's so many options in the market today. So this is an especially interesting topic for those of you that either might be a UiPath customer already and or looking at different and various automation options. There are a lot to choose from, and Sebastian is going to tell us about the opportunity he had to evaluate some of those options, and what that looked like. Pros, cons, good, bad, all of the above. So thank you, Sebastian, for being here with us. And I dropped a note in the chat. If any of you have questions, please feel free to drop it in there. We will be monitoring it and making sure that all of them get best answered to the best of our abilities. Again, none of us work for UiPath, so any questions about specific pricing, we can't help you with that. We can certainly try to get you in touch with someone that might be able to help you with, but we're not here to cover how any of the pricing specific data. I know that's always a big topic and everybody always has questions about that, but none of us are UiPath employees, so we can't help you. But we can certainly try to put you in touch with the right people if that is something that you're interested in. So anyway, with that small disclaimer, I'll give it over to Sebastian, and he is going to lead us through the journey that they've been on. So thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Really appreciate the invite, and hopefully I can explain a little bit of what we went through in the last year and a half. As Courtney explained, basically we spent about the whole last 12 months trying to understand and migrate some of our automations that we initially had in UiPath to a new tool. So that's what I'm going to speak about a little bit more today, and what our experience was like. So Courtney mentioned I work for World Connect. It's been 9 years with World Connect. We started our RPA program back in 2018, and there's a lot of lessons learned through that time. So hopefully you can get some valuable information out of this presentation, which I'm very excited about. This is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So with not further ado, let me share my screen and jump into a presentation. Courtney, you kind of confirm that it's visible now?
Yes, you're
awesome.
Good.
Awesome. So I'll jump right into it. Just when I started putting, one of the questions that Courtney and I had was, so 2016, what was the RPA status at the time? What was the market like? And what is the outlook today? So I did a little bit of comparison just to have 3 points in history. 2016 was when RPA started like getting a lot of traction, dominated by 3 companies. At that time was UiPath, Automation Anywhere, and Blue Prism. How many of you may have heard of them or even work with them? By 2024, the landscape had shifted a little bit. Now UiPath and Microsoft are the leaders. So Microsoft was not there in 2016, but now it is. And I think Automation Anywhere is also leading the Magic RPA Quadrant from Gartner, which is a very well-known report that I'm going to show you a comparison in the next slide. And by 2025, like every single RPA vendor is talking about generative AI, how to embed artificial intelligence within their offering. And I think that's going to change things a little bit drastically in the next few months and years to come. So I took, if you're familiar with the Gartner RPA Magic Quadrant, on the left, you have what the landscape used to look like in 2019 versus what it looks on the latest report, which was January 2025. So if you can see on the top right corner of the 2019 quadrant, you will see UiPath, Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere being there as leaders. Now, some of the things that I noticed while going through this exercise is that Automation Anywhere and UiPath has been consistently been there on the top Blue Prism in 20, I will say 2023, started losing a little bit of their advantage. So I think they're getting a little bit behind in terms of becoming those leaders based on this Gartner's report. And then we have some other offerings that are not longer considered either because they not longer exist or because they decline and fall out of the quadrant. Those you can see WorkFusion was there in 2019, is not longer in 2025. Edgeburst was another one, and Kovacs as well. So there were a lot of competitors 2019, and there are only a few now in 2025. This could be because of various reasons, but I found those notes to be interesting to see how everything has shifted in the last few years. Still, UiPath at the top in terms of execution and in terms of vision. Seems like Microsoft has a little bit of an edge, but on the most part, UiPath has been consistently been there at the very top of the quadrant. Something that I noted or that I found interesting sharing with you guys. So in terms of what we have experienced on our side, I want to break it down in three different stages. As I mentioned, we recently in the last 12 months went through a phase of migrating some of our RPA bots that we built in UiPath to a new platform. And this is our experience. I want to talk a little bit of what that looked like. So I divided in three different stages: the stage of planning, then execution, and then support. So that thing for each one of these stages, I hope to give some lessons learned and kind of explain a little bit of what we find during this process. Just for initial context, our RPA program started in 2019. It was led by Courtney, so she's very aware of what that looks like and definitely can speak more to that than I can. I joined the team in 2018. So I've been growing up with the program as well. So it started in 2018. At that time, we defined UiPath as our RPA vendor. Um, Everything was on-prem. We didn't have UiPath Cloud or anything like that. Everything needed to be hosted in local VMs that we run. At the time, I think we have physical servers. We're transitioning to AWS in the cloud, but it was a little bit there and on the cloud, but we needed our own servers to run the orchestrator, to run the studios, to run the bots. Everything needed to be on-prem. And then something to worth mentioning is we didn't have Studio Web, we didn't have Document Understanding, we didn't have AI Center. Everything was pretty much composed by the UiPath Orchestrator and the UiPath Studio and the agent. Those three were the big pieces that made up the RPA kind of ecosystem at that point in time. Nowadays, that have changed a lot, and there are so many new products, so many new ways to do things. But when we started in 2018, those were the three main components. And I remember when we look at automations, we always think about, hey, how can we connect to a database, get data out of the database, convert it, massage it, and then go through the UI if we needed to create or book a transaction or something like that. So SQL queries were big, and we didn't have a warehouse. So we needed to connect either to some tables that had to reports data or live connect to the databases, which nowadays is something that is not secure. Well, it has never been secure, but nowadays it's not seen with good eyes. So that was what we were at in 2018 when we started this. Just for you to have that context of how long the program has been going and the many opportunities that we have nowadays with the different tools and the different patterns that we can now create with the offerings that are nowadays. It was also a good opportunity for us to think about what we built in 2018 and how can we refactor some of the automations we did. Okay, so big question, and this is something that I think most people will ask themselves is why do you guys decide to migrate? Plain and simple, it was cost. Our licensing cost was gonna double at the end of our contract. We initially signed, I think it was 3-year contract, or that was our last contract. We had contracts before, but at the end of our latest contract, the cost was going to double. So that was a no-go for our organization. And we decided to say, hey, let's explore outside of well, we currently have what offers are out there. Uh, so when we started the migration, and this was the snapshot, like, hey, we have 12 months we have to renew. We have around 250 automations. We call it flows, automations. You can, like the UiPath packages, that's what we refer to, because bots, processes can be kind of a mixed term, depending on who company you talk with. And then we have three different teams working on automation. So we have a central COE, and then we have two satellite teams working on finance and also working on financial operations. Those were two big hubs of of work that led those teams to create their own RPA teams with devs and business analysts. So that was our initial. That's what we had to to work with when we started the migration. Also, part of our new contract, and we actually, the vendor we chose to do our migration was to Microsoft Power Platform. And part of the new contract that we got with Microsoft was we're gonna help you guys to migrate, and we're gonna provide you with a contractor team. So Microsoft provided us with a contract. It was a third party, it was not Microsoft themselves. They put us in contact with them, and they pay for this contractor to help us, at least with some of the automations that we initially had to migrate, and also the know-how, right? Because at this point we were not experts on the Microsoft suite. We have some internal resources that were very knowledgeable of SharePoint and other, like Microsoft Exchange or Microsoft services, but not Power Automate, Power Platform. So that contractor was also going to help us with that know-how within the company. We have around 20 RPA developers actively working on this migration, and three different, oh, I put down SMEs, but actually these are business analysts that help us gather all the information, and one PMO that help us orchestrate the whole migration. At the end, when we did the numbers, we migrated around 2,200 automations. Initially, we were 250, but as we started, I'm going to show you what methodology we use. We noticed that out of those 250, we only needed to migrate 200, which, if you take 20 developers, 200 automations, we have 12 months. You're looking about, on average, about one developer had to deliver an automation per month for us to hit that target. So that was our initial, like a snapshot of where we at before we started migrating. And this was our strategy. So I think this is not secret to anyone, right? What three things that we look at is like inventory criteria, like how do we define how to inventorize our automation. Is like, first we look at license consumption, and we categorize the automations in low, medium, high, depending how many hours they were running. And this was very easy to do in UiPath because, as I explained at the beginning, we were all running. We didn't have Web Studio Web or anything like that, so everything was running on nodes on a VM, using the UI for the most part, or at least doing background operations on a VM. So we can know exactly how long these licenses were being consumed per each one of the processes. So that allows us to know, okay, process A is running 20 hours a month. So that's consuming 1% of all the license pool that we have available. Or maybe we have another process that was running 5 bots at the same time, and those bots were running, I don't know, 50 hours a week. So we had 250, something like that, hours a month. So that process was a very high consumer of licenses. The other criteria that we look at is what is the effort to migrate an automation? Is it low, medium, high? And the way we find this is how many lines of code do we have? How many steps are we going the automation? And that helps us how large the automation it is. So we have the repos, we know how many lines each repo had. Also, because of the documentation that existed for each one of the processes and the knowledge that each developer had, they could tell us, hey, this is high, this is medium, this is low. So that was another classification that we used. And then a third one that we call like automation fitness is like when we inventorize this, like what is it that we want to do with this? We want to lift and ship. Do we want to decommission because it's not any longer adding value to the organization, or it's not longer needed? Do we want to refactor, like do a whole different thing, or do we want to say, hey, maybe this should be redesigned? And by redesign, we mean maybe this should go somewhere else. It's not longer RPA. This should go into the ERP. This should go into this new product that we have. That's what we meant by redesign. So on the left side, you have this heat map that you can see. On the x-axis, you have the effort, and the y-axis, you have the consumption. So the sweet spot is where you can find low effort to migrate and very high license consumption. That's where we initially focus on. And that allows us to, even though, and the mindset was like, even though we're not able to migrate 100% of the automations, at least we're gonna significantly reduce the amount of licenses we'll be renewing next year. That was the mindset behind it. In terms of prioritization, yeah, I mentioned that already. That's how we organize ourselves. So that was the strategy around it. And these are some lessons learned that we learned from that initial planning phase. So skill up your dev team. Initially, I don't think we were very versed on the platform itself, the target platform, which in this case was the Power Platform. Our dev team were not very familiar with it. It took a lot of time to make that shift in your mind. Like, hey, this is how things are done in UiPath. These are how now things are going to be done in Power Automate. There was a big difference, and the knowledge of the platform was not there from the very beginning. So we have to go to a steep curve on learning that out, and that delayed us from actually getting that velocity we wanted, which was one process per month per developer. So that was something that I if anyone is going to something similar, like skill up your team from the as soon as you can. So when you are actually going to start a migration, they are very well versed in the platform, and it's going to be easier for them. Consider the SLAs when designing. So some of the processes in UiPath and business requirement were very tough. They say, hey, the performance that we currently have in UiPath is the minimum that we will accept in the UATs. So the business wanted the same performer or better. They didn't want us to wait any longer of what they were waiting on a report, on a transaction getting executed. So knowing those SLAs and being able to compare what was the performance in UiPath versus what was in Power Automate, that was definitely a challenge. In a lot of ways, you need to re-architect a lot of your processes because, as you mentioned, in the beginning, we only have UiPath Studio. Now UiPath Web is Studio Web is available. So do you do a lot of things with APIs nowadays, like API automation? Initially, when we had the process, some of the processes built, we only have UI desktop automation. So that, depending on what you're doing, could be better performant or less performant. So if you're doing APIs on a lot of data, that's going to take a lot of time. If you're doing a SQL query on a database that you can access on a node that is very data intensive, probably that's going to perform way better than doing a bunch of API calls over and over to retrieve data, massage it, and all of that. So those kind of things you have to understand how they are going to impact your migration and how they are going to impact the processes once you move them into a new platform. Point number 3 was around the same topic that I mentioned. What is the right architecture? Cloud flows versus desktop flows, or API automation versus desktop automation, if that makes sense. You need to understand that well, and you need to know what fits where. So what automation is better suited on a cloud flow? For the most part, we try to go there, but there are some type of automations that are better served on a desktop flow. Another definitely important topic is point number 4. How are you going to deal with security and password management on the new platform? We were not ready in that sense, so that delays as well. Setting up the way to manage passwords took some time to figure it out, and also took time to also define the governance, who has access to what, and how can we make updates, and who is able to retrieve the passwords without actually knowing the password. That kind of decision making, or that kind of structure around security, something that we didn't have from the get go, and took some time to get done, and that delay us from at the beginning of the process. So something to have in mind. Uh, we committed to a lot of licenses. That's point number is 5. Initially, that at the end, looking 1 year back, is like we didn't need to commit to that many licenses initially, and this has a very well reason that I can speak to later. But for the most part, I will start nowadays start with a low commitment on licenses, so I understand what is it that I need. And maybe year number 2, I will say, hey, I know where I'm at, and I know how much I'm gonna grow. So it makes sense to get on a bigger contract. Uh, so that's one of the lessons learned that I get. And if using a vendor or a contractor to help you ramp up your migration, yeah, choose them wisely. Unfortunately, we didn't have the best of experience, so that's something that I'll note here. Or anyone doing this, try to assess who they are, what experience do they have, who are the team members behind that contractor if possible. Uh, so stage number 2 is execution, and I'll try to go a little bit faster because we're running out of time. But this was the anatomy, or these were the steps that we took for us to migrate a solution. So the first step that we took was the stakeholder engagement, in which we validated that the process still adding value. So if we notice some processes are not being longer used, we will immediately flag those as decommissioned. So we are not going to waste any time on migrating those because they're not adding any value. This will allow us also to update contact information. So for example, if an animation has moved to different teams, or any of the initial stakeholders are not longer within the company, we will update that information in this space. Also, we will communicate and give the stakeholder peace of mind, saying, hey, we are going to migrate, but you don't have to worry. The process won't break. We will make sure that it keeps running in the UiPath as long as it needs to, until we have a very stable process in the target platform. So that communication allows to have a lot of control over that anxiety that gets created when you need to migrate, especially around stakeholders, and also allows to understand if they find improvements could be done to an animation that is already running, we can capture those, and on a later stage we can say, hey, this will be an easy add-on when doing the migration, or we will take note of it, but we will leave this as phase 2 of once we have migrated, we can revisit this and make that an enhancement on the target platform, if that makes sense. Step number 3 was capture process documentation, making sure that we have everything in one place for developers, and also the code repositories will be available for developers so they can easy access, and they can start working without having to wait for any of this. That was step 2. Technical review is where you define, where we define, hey, this is the way things are going to be done on the new platform. Do we need to use APIs instead of desktop automations, or do we need to maybe disconnect from a database because we're not in compliance, because internal policies? Those kind of questions were raised in the technical review. Or maybe this is somewhere else. This don't have to be RPA anymore. This goes into DRP or any other platform. Then we did development. Here in development, I have a very good hack that I'll explain at the end of the session. It takes a little bit of time to explain, but if we have time, I'll share with you guys. In UAT, of course, we will do user acceptance testing, making sure that that business is feeling comfortable with the new process, the performance, and then at the end, we'll have a sign-off on the documentation for sure. So lessons learned from execution stage. The initial stakeholder engagement is key. This will allow us to address some of the things that I already mentioned, right? And also making sure you have control over the narrative and reduce the anxiety that gets created when you have to migrate. Take your time with the technical review. This is key as well because it will allow you to understand that SLAs or that expectations that need to be met from the old platform into the new one. So if you don't, and if you're going to have gaps or you're going to have change different in times, you need to communicate that to a stakeholder so they understand why, and hopefully they get more benefits out of that change. We look at API first in term instead of UI. Reason being is because APIs tend to be consume less resources, they're less expensive in terms of time, and they are easily scalable compared to UI automations. But whenever we can do APIs first, we will go that route. If not, we will go with traditional like desktop automations. And this is part of the hack that I was telling you. We use LLMs to convert some of the code from UiPath into a Node platform. So that was the hack that I was mentioning. Unfortunately, I won't have time here to explain how we did it, but that's a good topic for us to expand maybe on a future meeting. Then moving to the support stage, uh, I don't have much in terms of any any playbook on how we did this stage, but we have some lessons learned, which is UiPath is definitely the best tool that at least I have used for UI automation. We struggle a lot trying to replicate some of the same behavior with Power Platform in terms of, especially with legacy applications where you have grids, where you have to exactly click on a cell on a particular application. That was very painful. And there are some automations that we couldn't migrate because of this. So I would say like 10% of the automations are still 10-20% of the automations are still running in Power Automate, and I'm sorry, in UiPath because this reason. And there were a lot of effort to migrate. So we say, hey, this consumes some licenses, but it's okay. I think the effort of migrating this versus the effort of the amount of licenses that they are consuming, it worth it. Keeping these automations in UiPath, and we have teams that um, can support them, and also it allows to have UiPath within the company where UiPath makes sense in a lot of ways for automation opportunities. Like for example, queues. That's point number 2. UiPath queues are great, and this is something that you don't realize until you start using queues for our vendors. They are very good. You can control how many parallel executions are happening, and you can regulate that. That's not a given in some of our vendors, or some of our vendors have a cap of how many bots can be running over the same queue. UiPath doesn't have that limitation. So that was something that we understood that is great within UiPath once we struggle a lot with making this work somewhere else. Document understanding, UiPath document understanding is great. I only know of another vendor that has something comparable to document understanding. So OCR, making document management. UiPath has a super good offering on this. So if you're looking for use case on document understanding, I wouldn't, and you already have using UiPath, I wouldn't waste too much time looking somewhere else. Use UiPath because it offers a great solution for OCR, or intelligent document extraction, I think they call it nowadays. And number 4 is UiPath is a very strong contender to any RPA vendor. So we're currently mixing a lot of our code or our automations using UiPath. Using UiPath, using Power Platform, and also now embedding Python scripts within those automations. And I think on the near future, um, because how accessible is now writing code with these LLMs, I think over time Python is going to gain more traction to be more of a opportunity or more of an option when people need to automate processes. Still, there are things that are missing from the ecosystem, but I think it's something we're going to hear more and more. That was it. I'm sorry. I think I went over 5 minutes, but this is my LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you want to follow, and I'll leave it up to questions. Let me just stop sharing and give back the meeting to Courtney.
Sebastian, you did not go over, so thank you very much for keeping it very concise. Though we appreciate that, and it was full of a ton of good information. So, and please, if anybody has any questions, feel free to. You're welcome to go off mute and ask them yourself. And or if you're not comfortable with that, you can put them in the chat. We are monitoring it. I did drop a link to one of the articles that Sebastian had published not too recently, which was actually on this topic, which is why we thought it might be a really good one. And it's definitely one that our chapter members have been asking about as well in other meetings. So I put a link to that post out there in the chat. And that you can also find Sebastian that way as well on LinkedIn. So, please check that out and reach out to him. But so, Sebastian, I actually have a question. So when you were going through the automation fitness, I am assuming that one of the things that you evaluated was, because you said you still have a number of probably more complex automations running on UiPath, since that's got a lot of the more advanced features. So was that one of the criteria that you used as well to evaluate whether it made sense to migrate that process to another tool or just leaving it on UiPath to continue running it?
Yeah. I think initially when you approach a new vendor, right, they sell you like, hey, of course we're going to be able to do this and that, and everything is going to work well. Unfortunately, we didn't know from the beginning, even though we had run some POCs before to make sure that, hey, yes, we are going to be able, or we feel comfortable to jump into a new tool. We realized some limitations of the new target tool. And unfortunately, we didn't know this from the beginning. For example, we have a very legacy application called Watson, and that application, was not easy to automate even using UiPath. But when we tried to power our platform, it was like, this is going to take a lot of effort, and we're not even sure if we're going to be able to accomplish 100% of we currently had in UiPath. So that unfortunately was not there on the fitness assessment that we did for each one of the automations. But as soon as we knew that, we discarded every automation that had to do with that application. We'd say, no, all these automations are going to stay on UiPath because it makes sense to keep them there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then and I don't remember, or if you have rolled it out, do you currently have any like citizen development opportunities or initiatives? And did you have to take that into consideration as well?
Yes, that's a great question. And I don't think I mentioned it. We did have a citizen developer program within UiPath. So part of the effort that we had to went through is to reach out to one of these citizen developers. Thankfully, and not thankfully, that the program was not that large. It had like 20 members. So what we did is we helped these 20 members migrate. We taught them how to use the new platform. So some of them migrate their own automations, but the rest were like, no, I don't have the bandwidth to migrate this. So we helped them out as well, and they became citizen developers on the new platform.
Yeah, I would definitely think that goes back to your point about communication as well, right?
100%. And I cannot stress this enough. Like, I think what can kill an initiative like this is that communication, right? Managing that anxiety that gets into people and say, hey, we're not going to no longer use UiPath, or at least not to the same usage they're giving it now. Even within the developers, that was a struggle, right? Because developers, they love UiPath. I love UiPath. For me, it was not an easy decision, right? I'm a UiPath MVP, and I still have problems like discussing this topic because of the position that I'm at. But I try to be as open as I can, in the sense that definitely there are competitors out there, and there are things that competitors do better, and there are things that UiPath do better. So I think bringing clarity and making sure you understand when and when use what, that's a great advantage, so you don't make mistakes like many of the ones we did, and I mentioned them. But managing that, communicating that to stakeholders, and also within your developer community is key, because otherwise a project or initiative like this can go down easily if you don't manage that correctly.
Well, and I think the point you've also made as well, because you're obviously still running both tools. And so, I think that's also another good point, is that you've got to pick the right tool to have the right solution. So it's not like a one size fits all. It doesn't have to be a one size fits all, especially when you've got other constraints and things that you need to take into consideration. So it's important that we are evaluating solutions at different levels to come up with the best one to get the job done.
Yeah, that's exactly fine. And I think that the landscape is changing so rapidly, right? With AI, when we make that decision, one of the reasons where we went with Microsoft was like, hey, Microsoft has Copilot, but now you also have that agentic kind of orientation from UiPath. So UiPath is really oriented to agentic automation. So things are changing day a day. So my experience is not going to be the same that another company has now, or maybe it's going to have 6 months from now, because it's changing so drastically that you have to make sure that you understand your use case, you understand your situation before making a decision like this.
Andres, it looks like there's a question in the chat. Did you see that one?
I did have a question also. It's Tracy. As far as new development, I don't know if you could necessarily compare migration, since you've already figured out the solution and know how it was approached in the past. But for new development, how do you find the length of time that developers take to create a new solution in the Power Platform versus UiPath?
Yeah. That's a great point. That's a great question. And speaking bluntly here is, I think it takes a little bit more time to develop an automation on Power Platform. One of the biggest reasons is because I would say like nearly 80-70% of what we build it on Power Automate cloud flows, which is similar to what UiPath has on Studio Web, which is all API based. And depending how big your automations are, working on the browser can be painful. Logging, the time it takes to render your changes, the time that it takes to build expressions. Unfortunately, Power Automate, I don't think they have a very good language when it comes to creating your own expressions, your own manipulating the data you want, like creating a timestamp or creating or trimming on a string. Those kind of things takes a little bit more time. But I think it's also unfair if you compare it to Studio, because Studio, you're working on the node, you're working on the VM. So the answer to your question, Tracy, will be yes. I think we're spending more time building the automations nowadays. But I don't think it's because it's comparing apple to apples. It's a little bit of a mix of things that make it that way. What I will say is, like, once you build, and this happens in your iPad as well, once you build an automation that is API based, it's gonna be very stable. It's gonna run very smoothly. So I think that investment in time that you do at the development phase, it kind of pays back once the automation is built. I don't know if that answered the question. I know it's a little bit of hard to answer it like black and white.
Yeah, I definitely have had it where certain cases that are completely within, the Microsoft Office products can be fairly straightforward and easy and seamless. But I found the debugging and logging experiences to not be nearly what I would have hoped for, and found that to be a trouble spot, at least for me in the past when I've had to handle
I
Power
will
Automate.
echo that. I think that has been my experience as well.
I know Andres is answering a couple of questions in the chat. One was about orchestration and how having the ability to, let's see, let me just read for you. How do you find orchestration in Power Automate compared to UiPath? And do you have a single point of monitoring, both Power Automate and UiPath? Oh, that's interesting. Or do you monitor from both platforms?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have a single like point of monitoring. We go to the UiPath orchestrator to check on what happened. We use a lot of alerting using email, so that's kind of centralized, I would say. But yeah, for the most part, each platform we use them separately. They don't have like a single monitor in place. And to the second question, in terms of what was performance compared to orchestration, I think it's different. It's different. It's not that one is better than the other. It's just different. I think UiPath has a very good uh, like orchestrator. I think I love UiPath orchestrator. It makes things so simple. With Power Automate, you have to click here and there, but at the end of the day, you can get similar kind of experience with it. What I will say though is that um, something that I will have to give some benefits to Power Automate is that this is good and bad as well. You when you work with Microsoft, you're within Microsoft ecosystem, and they try to keep you very close within their suite of products. So Word, all the Office suite. Then they really push you to use Dataverse, which is their integration services. No, not integration, data services equivalent in UiPath. So they really push you to use it. So once you do that, then your data becomes like locked down within Dataverse. And the good thing about it is that it's very easy to build dashboards on top of it using Power BI. But then if you want to make that data accessible to other tools, then when you struggle. So it has to goods and bads as well. So we do, going back to your question is, how do we monitor? Recently, we have been using that approach a lot. Like new solutions that we built within the Power Platform, we build dashboards on top of that using Power BI, and that makes the automations to be a little bit more readable and comprehensible to the end user, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Andres, did we answer all the questions in the chat, or is there anything else? I know you're out there answering them. Oh, Andres, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Hello. Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, now we can.
Awesome. Yeah. I just I was responding to the question about the different orchestration feature sets between Power Automate and UiPath, and I just remembered that when I was trying Power Automate, the only way to really have a handle of everything that was happening in your organization was to install this Center of Excellence solution that came, what do you call it, from Power Automate, but it was basically a very complicated Power Automate process or solution that was just acting as a governance over everything else, whereas UiPath is like a completely dedicated orchestrator, which in my opinion is much more robust and much more like built from the ground up to handle not only governance but also orchestration. And then I also I'm not super familiar with the exact triggering mechanisms that are available within Power Automate, but I know that UiPath now has a super robust not only time triggers, which I think are available in Power Automate, but you have the webhook triggers, the integration service triggers, and most importantly, the queue triggers, because I think the queues being like a foundational object within UiPath is really what makes a huge difference for both metrics tracking and orchestration. And I wanted to get Sebastian's opinion on that.
No, Andres, I think you make very good points. A lot of Microsoft approach to things are like build them yourself. Like you have a bunch of things that are available, but you have to build them. And you have to leverage a lot of Azure services as well if you want to make things similar to what you're used to. So I agree with that. What you were referring to is in the Microsoft world, they call it COE toolkit, Center of Excellence toolkit, where it's basically a solution that you have to install within your channel, and that connects to Dataverse, which has all the login from what the bots have created, and then you can pull metrics out of it. In that sense, what you mentioned is very true. You have to install it, you have to configure it and making sure that it works to your needs. And if you need something additional to that, then you'll have to go and create it out of your way. But it is not a plug and play like you will get out of the orchestrator. So in that sense, yeah, I agree with you that yes, orchestrator is very easy to work with. It gives the visibility you need. And if you don't have something there, you can build it right using also the dashboard capabilities that UiPath has. So I agree with that. And the second point you made was the queues. Yeah, I think I mentioned this a little bit of this. Queuing in UiPath is great. We haven't been able to certain use cases to mimic exactly what we had in UiPath, and it's features that these are features that we have requested, like the Microsoft team to come up, because I think UiPath exceeds in terms of if you really need queues and have control over them, especially about having control of bots running on parallel on top of the queues. Yeah, UiPath excels at that, and I haven't seen anything similar to that kind of behavior elsewhere.
Sebastian, we've got a user with a hand raised. Aldo, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? You want to come off mute?
Yes, I have a question about UiPath and Python integration. So my question is, currently in Power Automate Desktop, Power Automate Desktop has actions to execute Python scripts. So in UiPath, we have something similar, or with another language, with another programming language like C# or something like that.
Andres, I don't know if you want to answer this. I've been kind of, I can speak on the Power Automate side. I haven't done UiPath lately with Python. I don't know if you have any experience with it.
Honestly, I might be a little bit off here, but I did remember hearing that in the near future, and this might have been at the MVP Summit, that they're working on integrating Python scripts directly within UiPath Studio, but don't quote me on that. Other than that,
I know for a
Python
fact that there are like packages, Python packages that you can install in the studio so you can run Python scripts. Let me just spend 1 minute here, because it is true that you can work with Python or run Python scripts on the Power Platform on the desktop automations. Nonetheless, you only have one version of Python that you can run this on, and you cannot install like packages. Like, for example, if you use pandas, which is a very common library that you use in Python to manipulate data, that you cannot use with the native Power Automate activities that you use to run Python with. So I myself found running PowerShell scripts, like to run Python scripts. So for example, I'll run, instead of using the native activities to use Python within the Power desktop, or the desktop solution for Power Automate, you will have, I'd rather be calling PowerShell scripts on those scripts that I store somewhere in my documents on that node. In that sense, UiPath can do exactly the same, right? I can run PowerShell commands to call the Power Automate script, the Python scripts. So in that capability kind of is similar if you are running into those issues that I mentioned, when you need libraries or you need Python versions that are not the ones available within the native activities that the Power Automate desktop offers. I don't know if I answered your question, Aldo.
But
Yes,
also
thank you.
on UiPath, I guess in theory, you could just run something directly from the command line, because you're not, as long as you like install it properly to the machine that you're running UiPath on, I guess in theory you could run any sort of Python script within a workflow.
Yeah. I don't think it's like as easy as running an activity, but there are definitely ways to get it done.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, you could just run like a PowerShell activity, and as long as you have,
Exactly.
your Python program well set up, then it's just like, you'd have to do the hard work of making sure that your Python program is up and running on whatever machine you're running the RPA on. But then eventually you could just use a PowerShell activity to kick off the program that you've carefully developed, and it should just work.
Guys, thanks for all of the great questions and participation. We appreciate the dialogue. It's always more exciting to have an interactive session with a great presenter. So, Sebastian, thank you for this. This has been really, I know it's been really informative. And I think we've all learned a lot. So thank you for putting this together. Thank you for your hard work and doing your migration as well. I know that wasn't easy, but I do have one pressing question. Did you get it done in 12 months?
No. Definitely not. We're still working through it.
Well, that means you've still got work to do, and I'm sure you'll have more to learn as well as you finish it. So, but thank you once again. Thanks for your great questions. We appreciate it. If I didn't say it before, I don't think Sebastian said it either. Sebastian is actually based in Costa Rica. So you know, please again feel free. I put the link to his article in the chat. You can find him that way on LinkedIn. The presentation will get sent out. So, you know, in case you're watching this as a recording, the presentation will be out there so you can review that. Sebastian's contact information is in there as well. And I put a link to our next event in the chat so you can see and sign up for that. Andreas will be presenting Autopilot for Dummies. I might be the only dummy in attendance at that event, but I'm sure we'll all learn a lot from that as well. So for those of you that are looking to learn more about Autopilot, that is the topic for our next event in August. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. Thank you, Sebastian, for your time and all your energy that went into this. So we appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
All right. Bye, all. Thank you.